Hello, welcome to Thor Talk, the show all about Marvel's resident god of thunder. On this episode of Thor Talk, we will answer the question, how old are Thor and Loki? I will give an age range for the god of thunder and the god of mischief in both the movies and the comics on Thor Talk.
I am Thor the Thunderer, son of Odin, prince of Asgard, and this world is under my protection.
Okay, so first we will answer the question of Thor and Loki's ages in the movies, because that is much simpler. Now, we do not have a lot of concrete information on Thor's age, but we have plenty of information that hints at Loki's age. So if we determine how close the two are in age, we can determine Thor's age as well. Now, in Thor Ragnarok, we have this scene.
There was one time when we were children, he transformed himself into a snake, and he knows that I love snakes. So I went to pick up the snake to admire it, and he transformed back into himself, and he was like, yeah, it's me! And he stabbed me. We were 8 at the time.
Not only is this scene hilarious, but it tells us that Thor and Loki are roughly the same age, as Thor says, we were 8 at the time. My guess is that Loki is a little bit younger than Thor, but not by a lot. So by determining Loki's age, we will determine Thor's age as well, with a standard deviation of about a year. According to the text at the beginning of the first Thor movie, the Frost Giants invaded Earth in 965 AD, and Odin found Loki when he was an infant after driving back the Frost Giants to Jotunheim. So Loki was likely born in 965 AD. We've already established that Thor and Loki are within a year of each other, so it seems likely that both were born around 965 AD. The first Thor movie takes place in 2010, even though it came out in 2011, so that means that Thor and Loki were about 1,045 years old during the first Thor movie. Kevin Feige has already confirmed that Avengers Infinity War is indeed set in 2018, so Thor and Loki are 1,053 years old in Avengers Infinity War. Now, on to the comic book age of Thor and Loki. This is where it gets more tricky and less precise. In the comics, the event known as Ragnarok has occurred several times throughout history. Ragnarok involves all of the gods dying and later being reborn or reincarnated, only to die again in the next Ragnarok. So Thor has been around in one form or another for thousands or even millions of years. Now for this, we'll be looking for the age of the modern Thor, who we all know and love. There were no exact dates given about when Gaia gave birth to this Thor, but we do know when the version of Thor before the modern Thor died in Ragnarok. According to Thor number 293, the Thor before our Thor, say that 5 times fast, died over 2,000 years ago during the birth of Christ. So we know that the modern Thor was born after the year 1 AD, because he had to have been born after the old Thor was killed in Ragnarok. Now remember that all the gods died in Ragnarok, and Thor is one of the younger gods, so Thor was likely born sometime after the year 1 AD, as other gods had to be reborn before him. Now, there is very little information as far as dates go after this Ragnarok. The earliest concrete date that we have is 893 AD, when Thor was younger and still had not lifted Mjolnir. During this time, Thor was about as tall as he is in modern times, which we know because he met his modern self, and the Asgardians grow at the same rate as humans until they reach adulthood, so Thor is likely at least 17 years old during this time. Assuming that at least 50 years have passed for some of the older gods to be born before Thor, which is very generous given the lifespan of the gods, we can determine that Thor was born between the year 51 AD and 876 AD, making Thor 1,967 to 1,142 years old. That's a very large range, and I would say Thor is somewhere close to 1,200 years old, but I have no proof as to his exact age, so you'll have to settle with that range. Now, there is some information that conflicts with this age range, as in some of the comics, Thor says that he has thousands of years of memories despite being less than 2,000 years old, and that he is older than the human race. He's likely referring to the memories of his past lives, as when Thor brought about the final Ragnarok, which ended the cycle, he remembered every moment of his thousands of years of thousands of lives. So he has thousands of years of experience despite being less than 2,000 years old. As far as Loki's age, we have about the same amount of information. We know that the old Loki died in the same Ragnarok that the old Thor did around the birth of Christ, and the earliest that we see modern Loki is 896 AD, only 3 years after the earliest we see Thor. So he's roughly in the same age range as Thor, but I think he's definitely younger than Thor, by maybe a year. Well, that's all for this episode of Thor Talk. If you want to keep up with Thor Talk and all Thor-related news, follow Thor Talk on Instagram @Thor Talk. You can also keep up with and support Thor Talk by simply subscribing. Once again, I'd like to formally state that all art and videos owned by its respected companies, and I own none of it. With that said, see you next time on Thor Talk, where...
You'll behold in breathless wonder.